Alright, so thanks for joining me, YouTube and Transformer fans. This is going to be my spoiler video for the new Transformers 1 film. Again, I got some merch while I was there, hooray! Yeah, just Orion Pax drink cup. He's got a straw in his head, suck out his brains. They did have a Bumblebee or B-127 popcorn bucket, but I wasn't really interested in that. I don't have a shelf of Bumblebee merch. I have a shelf of Optimus Primes. So, to start off, the movie begins, introducing D16, who is Megatron, and Orion Pax, who is Optimus. I believe the very first scene is of Orion sneaking into a archive to watch some recordings about the Battle of the Primes and the Lost Matrix of Leadership. And that was really the first Easter egg of the film was Orion Pax, who in many continuities has been a archivist, basically a librarian of sorts, sneaking into a data vault, so that was a fun little Easter egg. There were plenty of little Easter eggs throughout the film, and they started off with a banger. It was like, oh cool, they're acknowledging this. There were so many different kind of continuities blended in, but it didn't feel like, oh, they're just pulling from A and B. It felt like they were taking ideas they've used and they know work and blending it into something a little more unique. I definitely didn't get bored with it. I am, definitely a huge fan. I got all these Transformers here. I got a mostly Transformer YouTube channel. So maybe I'm a little biased, but I definitely thought they did a good job with it. He obviously, gets caught by security and has to wiggle his way out of all of that. And while he was getting chased down, the guards were saying, "Oh, it's him again." This is clearly something he's done more than once. It was pretty funny. I enjoyed that, and seeing Pax Optimus, as the goofy troublemaker was definitely a new one for me. Because I know he's been, the original G1, he was like a dock worker. There were plenty of times he's been an archivist. There's been a couple times where he's been like a security officer / cop. But yeah, in this one he was a minor, just like D16, who I believe that originated in the IDW comics. I'm not 100% sure. I know that it was definitely present there though. But seeing him as a troublemaker was definitely new to me, and I don't think they've really explored that too much before. But it was definitely an interesting take, and they did a good job with it. Having him go through all this, and having to mature and own up to that things weren't always the best the way he did them, but he always had his heart in the right place and stuff like that. So after that, it shows them working, and he goes out of his way to save Jazz, who was basically a background character in this movie when he got pinned under some rubble, and they all narrowly escape. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I saw Jazz get his leg ripped off in the process. But they can repair that. They can't help him if he's dead. But yeah, and apparently Elita 1 was his supervisor, and she got fired on the spot for that. It was like, they're not gonna fire you, you're fired, literally just like that. And it was definitely one of those more slapstick moments, no, you are. But I thought it was alright. It wasn't the most hilarious thing ever, but it was I'm sure kids are definitely gonna enjoy that, and I didn't think it was horrible. And I think it was after that they announced the race, which they snuck into and used jetpacks to try and get through. And initially, after the whole thing is over, they didn't win because they both got their jetpacks knocked off, and they got I think D16 got his leg messed up a little bit right towards the finish line, and then Chromia, another one of the sort of background fembots, zoomed past him and gets first place, and then as they're like sitting there like, oh well, second place isn't so bad, and then the entire rest of the race just zips by him. And it was like, yeah, not so much. But it was an interesting little thing. And they're waiting in like a detention cell thinking, oh, we're doomed, we're going to be in so much trouble. And then Sentinel Prime pops up and tells them, like, oh, that was amazing, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen, you've inspired the other miners to do better, the mining, they're producing more than the needed quota, everything's going great, and I want to like personally thank you guys afterwards, and I gotta go do stuff, bribe stuff, and take them to my personal repair bay or something like that. And then one of the sort of antagonist characters, Dreadwing, who only really pops up briefly a couple times, but he clearly doesn't like these guys. And at some point in the race, I think they jumped on top of him, and that's how they almost got second place. He literally takes them and drops them like down to the garbage disposal lair where they meet B-127. While I'm on that, I remember some people were like asking why didn't they, have Alita 1 start out as Ariel, because Orion Pax, D16, B-127, and I think I understand why, is probably to avoid confusion, because honestly I don't think they even once in the movie called him Bumblebee. I think they just shortened it to B, and that was it. Because the two main characters, Pax and D16, are very recognizable either way, and they obviously end up as Optimus and Megatron. Even a lot of younger kids are gonna be able to dig that out. But Ariel is very much a deep cut compared to those two. I feel like there's still a good chunk of fans who would know about that. But most of them are going to be, long time / bigger fans. It's not something that a casual fan's really going to understand as much. And I think that's probably why they didn't really go the full Bumblebee route either, was probably to avoid using too many names and getting things too mixed up. But either way, they meet with Bumblebee, and he's got, he talks about how he's been down there forever doing trash smelting and all that. But he shows them his bunkmates or whatever, which are literally just 3 piles of garbage that he's given names. I can't remember. There was 3. One was Steve. The other was Aatron, which was a joke based on Michael Key's skit with Key and Peele, where he was doing the students that he was mispronouncing their names, and he said Aaron. So there was that, and I feel like the Steve might have been an Easter egg too, because Steven Spielberg and Steve Buscemi were both involved in the movie, Buscemi being the voice of Starscream. So I feel like that might have been an Easter egg. I can't remember the third name, but I feel like there might have been an Easter egg tied with that one too. I'm not entirely sure. Again, I forgot the name. But it was funny, and they accidentally kill Steve by knocking his head off. The pile of garbage is dead now, oh no. But that's when Pax notices that there is a little glowing bit in his head. He picks it up, and it's a little chip with a distress signal from Alpha Trion, and they figure, oh, this might be where the Matrix is hidden. So they try and get to the surface on one of these garbage disposal trains, which will come into play a few times throughout the film. And as they're trying to sneak onto one of these trains, they run into Alita, who is now in charge of putting these crates on the train, which are supposed to be toxic garbage that's going to the surface. They're trying to get to the surface to find this location. She catches on to the fact that there's somebody in the train, and they try and stop her from alerting the guards, and she ends up getting stuck on the train with them, going to the surface. And the trains are really cool. The track forms in front of them as they're going, and they go up to the surface. And this is where I think probably things get really interesting. They do discuss I think it was in the original broadcast that he was watching in the first scene, but they do mention how Primus is the planet, and how because the Matrix is lost, there's no energon flowing anymore. But during this, they go up to the surface, and like you can see, I mean, I know it was briefly in the trailer, like the landmass shifts here and there, but it turns out like it's basically it's really alive. You know, entire rock formations and mountains are moving and shifting, and it actually derails the train they're on. It smashes the train they're on, and they have to go on foot. And it's at this point that Orion Pax confers with Alita 1 about what they're actually trying to do to convince her to actually help them, and she agrees, but she's, you know, does the whole I'm gonna be in charge, because she's like super strict manager type throughout a good chunk of this movie. Make of that what you will. And eventually they come across what looks like a ghost town, really. And they hear something in the background, and there are these like mechanical deer that are around. And in a really cool, like, sort of sci-fi thing, when they sense danger, they have like these loop antlers. It's instead of, you know, branching out, it creates a loop, and there's like light inside of it, and when they sense danger, it changes from purple to red, and they all start running. And so they all start running into like this little ghost town, and this Quintesson ship comes around and starts like scanning the area, and they're, you know, wondering what's going on. And then one of the deer like scampers around, and then there's this like red light, you know, targeting beam, and it catches the deer and then just annihilates it. And then it starts scanning for other life forms, and they're able to hide in the rubble of this like ghost town and evade the ship. And so they continue on and end up in this more like hilly, forested area, and this is where I was pleasantly surprised. So the surface of Cybertron, not only did it have like, you know, robotic animals on it, but it actually had like plants and like forested area. Like there was moss and flowers and I think some trees. It looked like, you know, the actual surface of a planet. They had clouds. It was like there was, you know, an actual atmosphere, which usually, you know, they don't bother with that stuff. You know, it's a mechanical planet, so they don't usually, you know, bother, you know, looking at that side of things. So I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that there was, you know, organic life on the surface of the planet. That was very interesting. But as in the trailer, they find the cave with teeth, and they go in and they see, you know, all the primes, you know, and they're all dead. You know, the Matrix is gone from Prima, I believe, and like his chest has been ripped open. And D16, Megatron, goes over to Megatronus Prime's head. That thing you see in the trailer is just his head, because he was apparently huge. And it's been established that he was like a huge fan of Megatronus Prime, because in this he wasn't a traitor, he was like the big, powerful bruiser of the group. He was the big fighter. And he thinks that Megatronus was, you know, like the coolest out of all of them. So yeah, they're going over the dead primes, and you know, you see all of them to some extent, I believe, and yeah, pretty much they're all dead. Then as they're trying to figure out what to do next, Orion sees a little light in the distance. They go and move a bunch of rocks, and that's where they find Alpha Trion, and they notice that he's still alive, he's just in stasis. So Bumblebee pulls out an energon cube, and they like shove it into his mouth, and he wakes up. It's at that point that Alpha Trion reveals that Sentinel Prime is not, you know, is trying to save the planet or, you know, keep the Quintessons at bay. He struck a deal with the Quintessons to become the ruler of the planet and betrayed the other, well, the actual primes. He is not an actual prime. He is a false prophet, as it were. And he shows them this through like a weird, he has like this power to like manipulate dust and shrapnel on the ground, and he uses it to make images and move stuff around. and they reveal that the reason the bots are cogless is because Sentinel Prime takes their cogs before they awaken, and says that, I think it was no child of Primus is born cogless. And after this, they hear something going on outside, and they look, and there's a ton of Quintesson ships, and then this really, really big one lands, and all the trains pull up, and they see Sentinel Prime arrive, and he, gives them all these trains full of what was supposed to be garbage, but obviously is energon cubes. And it was also mentioned that, the energon isn't supposed to have stopped. They're not entirely sure. I feel like they kind of glazed over that, but essentially it is due to the Matrix being missing, but they did kind of glaze over that a little bit as to why that caused the energon to stop, and how apparently, because Alpha Trion was very confused by the fact that they were miners who mined for energon. So, but yeah, they see him give all the energon up, and there's a scene where he gets wrapped up by the Quintesson High Commander, who literally just screeches in his face, and he's like, "I'll get more energon. I'll get you what you asked for." Yada yada. Typical lackey kind of "don't hurt me" crap. But the design of the Quintessons was kind of interesting, because we see a High Commander who has a big round body and then a bunch of tentacles under him, and he floats, and he does have teeth in his mouth. You only really see it when he's screeching, and it's a side view, so it's kind of a blink and you'll miss it thing. But other than that, you just see a bunch of these basically drones, maybe foot shoulder, they're just, they're obviously the cannon fodder made to be, copy pasted to hell and back. And they basically look kind of like crabs almost. They have crab-like legs all coming from a singular point on the bottom, and then they have a big round body with two bulky arms on the side, and their face is sort of in the upper front of the body. But yeah, they sort of feel almost like crabs in this. And one hand I think is a blaster, and I think the other one I think has a claw on it. I don't remember super clearly, but they all look the same anyway. But yeah, basically they're oh, now we know the truth. Sentinel Prime is the bad guy, and that's pretty much the last we see with the Quintessons. They are mentioned again at the end, but that's the last we see of them. So I thought we were probably gonna have a bit more to do with them, but yeah, it is what it is. Hopefully they'll pop up in a sequel or something. But yeah, essentially what the common people believe is that the Primes drove off the Quintessons, but the Matrix was lost in the battle. But what really happened is Sentinel betrayed them, tried to take the Matrix, and because he was unworthy, it disappeared, disintegrated, sort of like how it did in the Michael Bay film. It just poofed. But yeah, at that point, they go back and talk with Alpha Trion, who gives them cogs from the fallen Primes. I don't remember which ones exactly, but yeah, he picked a couple from each one. I think the only one that I know I believe Prima went to Optimus Prime, but I don't remember. I think Micronus, Amalgamus, I can't remember the other one. I know that Megatronus, his becomes a thing later, but it was not involved in this particular scene. But yeah, so they get their cogs, and then they start getting attacked because Arachnid, who is basically Sentinel Prime's right hand, finds them and is obviously trying to kill them. But they go through a rear entrance, and they're basically Viacons, but these I think they're called Death Seekers on the products. They weren't mentioned by name in the movie, but I believe we've seen some toy listings for them called Death Seekers, or a model kit or something. But yeah, they come in. They're basically like the Prime Viacons, and they start attacking. And Alpha Trion, this is where we see him transform into that chimera laser tiger, whatever it was, and he takes them out, and in a really robotic voice they were like, "Step down, old timer," or something, and he has a cool one-liner, "Not too old for you," or something like that when he kills the last one. But that was actually pretty cool. But yeah, then I believe Arachnid comes in and captures him. But the others, they escape out the back, and they have that scene where they're like falling down the hill trying to transform, and eventually they do escape, and they're trying to get to one of the trains again to get back down to Icon City, because Alpha Trion upgraded the little chip thing that they found him with to have visual evidence of Sentinel's betrayal. And at some point at night they get like ambushed, and when they wake up they're in like a camp with a lot of the Decepticon characters, Soundwave, Shockwave, Starscream, all of them. You can see plenty of the Seekers and stuff in the back. I know that the Coneheads were there, Slipstream was there, that was cool to see. And basically they are apparently the Cybertron High Guard, is I believe what they were called, which essentially was a task force that was enlisted to help against the Quintessons, and they know Sentinel Prime is a traitor, and the reason he's been going up to the surface hasn't actually been to find the Matrix, it's been trying to get rid of these guys. But yeah, essentially they have a big altercation between D16 and Starscream, because Starscream was basically saying, "We're going to kill you, but if you give us some intel we'll make it quick and painless." And D16 is really starting to show some of those more harsh vibes. And one thing I did pick up on is like the more incidents where he starts to get more aggressive, the darker his eyes get, until they eventually turn red in the climax, which was really a nice little attention to detail, because they start like a bright orange, and at this point they're like a darker orange, and then they get a little darker and then eventually turn red. But yeah, so he and Starscream get into a fight, and he basically like crushes Starscream's voice box a bit, so he starts sounding really weird, which again I feel is like probably an Easter egg, because a lot of people in the G1 fandom kind of poke fun at how his voice was a little odd back then, and it's not quite the same, but his voice gets a lot higher pitched and crackly because like his voice box is damaged from getting chokeholded by Megatron. And it's at this point where like he first unleashes his fusion cannon on his arm, so that was interesting. And basically he starts saying that I believe it was at this point that he wants to go and destroy Sentinel Prime, and we need to take back Cybertron for ourselves, and he sort of invigorates all the High Guard. But that's when Arachnid and a bunch of those Viacons come in and attack them again, and they capture probably around half of these characters, and I'm pretty sure a few got blown up and stuff. But they capture Bumblebee, Starscream, and D16, and fly off with them. And the next morning, Orion wakes up, and Alita sort of has to comfort him, because he's like, I was wrong, D16, and you were right. I should have stuck to protocol. I shouldn't have been doing all this stupid stuff. And Alita 1 is like, no, there's a reason you are the way you are. And she starts off with, I'm better than you in every way, except for this, weird quirk that you have of, going and doing weird stuff. She gives him, a pep talk, and at first he's like, this is one hell of a pep talk. You ever done this before? It was kind of humorous. But yeah, essentially she convinces him that, what he's doing is what needs to be done. He's doing the right thing. So they rally the remaining High Guard, and they're like, we don't have enough people to do this. And so they go and try and recruit the miners. And when they get there, essentially he like sneaks into the miner barracks, knocks out, I believe it's Dreadwing, he knocks him out with he punches him into like a gambling machine or something. And then all the miners gather around him, and they're basically like, whoa, what happened to you? We heard you went out to the surface and died. And you can see he's visibly towering over them now. He used to be the same size as pretty much all of them, but now with a cog, he's, you know, a good, like, he's got quite some height on him. He's a lot taller. And basically he's like, I know this is going to be hard to believe, but this is what really happened. And, you know, explains what happened with Sentinel Prime and how he took all their cogs and how he's a traitor. And basically gives them a, you know, he starts with, you know, his Optimus Prime speeches, because, you know, that's a thing Prime does. And he tells them, you know, we got to take our future back, and, you know, we might not have cogs, but we still have sparks, and that's what makes us who we are. So, you know, he rallies all of them, and then it cuts back to the High Guard. They've hijacked a train, and Elita 1 has reprogrammed it to go to Sentinel's, like, personal tower in Icon City. And while they're on the way, all the prisoners that were taken are being held in that tower, and we get this scene between Sentinel and all the prisoners. He sort of torments or jokes at Starscream, and then D16 stands up and says, I'm never going to kneel before you. And so he starts kind of beating up on him, and then he takes this, like, special decal sticker that Pax had given him in the beginning of the film of Megatronus's face, which, you know, is the Decepticon symbol in this, puts it on his chest and says, like, let's make this permanent, and grabs, like, a blowtorch and carves it into his chest as a way to torture him. But even after that, he still stands up, even with, you know, B telling him, like, hey, stay down, like, let's not push this any further. And I believe that's when we cut back over. That's when Arachnid, who's apparently got like a bazillion eyes, and that's why she's, you know, in charge of keeping track of people and stuff, notices the train and goes to intercept it. And they're about to stop it when all the miners using jetpacks and mining tools come up and start fighting. And that's kind of when the final act of the movie begins. They crash the train into the tower, and they, you know, one cool thing is they had Soundwave come through, and he uses like this sonic pulse or something to, what's the word? Deactivate all their cufflinks or whatever. And they do use a similar alt mode to what they used in the Bumblebee design, the Bumblebee movie design. I do feel like it looks a little more refined here, and it's a bit more cube-like. He does have his standard-looking robot mode. They don't do anything with like him having cassettes or anything. That was probably more for budgetary reasons, and because like it didn't seem like there was really a good place to throw that in there. So you know, I kind of understand why they didn't pop that in there. Would have been cool, but I understand. Hopefully, you know, this movie will do well, and we'll get the Cassetticons in a sequel. But yeah, we get that, and you know, fight breaks out between Sentinels, you know, Death Seekers or whatever they are, and the Miners and the High Guard. And while D16 and Sentinel are just kind of duking it out again. Hey, sorry for the weird cut there. My camera card ran out of space, so I had to go deal with that, and while I was dealing with that, I got a delivery. So I now have my Studio Series Commander Prime, which I'm super excited about. Today just keeps getting better. But yeah, I'll be looking at that soon. Anyway, so yeah, Sentinel, they take Arachnid to the broadcast center. Bumblebee does his whole knife hands, hey, this door was already chopped up when I got here thing. It was kind of fun. But yeah, they use Arachnid to broadcast evidence of Sentinel's betrayal and how he takes everybody's cogs and how he works for the Quintessons, and it ends with a visual of him kneeling before the Quintesson commander. And yeah, that's basically when all hell breaks loose. And you see, like, it cuts down to the miners that are still in the mine, and they start like pushing the energon carts over and stuff and running out, and just basically full rebellion is in effect. And I think it was at this point Sentinel and D16 have bashed each other out of the tower, and are now on like this sort of monument in like this courtyard area, and they're just going at it in front of everybody. And I believe it's at this point that he has D16 has Sentinel basically lying on the ground, crawling away, and he's stomping towards him, getting ready to finish him off, and he pulls out his fusion cannon, and he's getting ready to stop him, and I believe that's when Pax comes in and pushes the cannon, causing him to misfire into like part of the monument, and part of it like comes crashing down. And he starts being like, why did you stop me? He needs to die. And this is like the culmination of like all these aggressive moments he's been having, because ever since the cave and finding out the truth, he's been saying that Sentinel needs to die and I want to be the one to kill him and stuff like that. Pax is saying like, this isn't the way to do this. We can rebuild the future and be better than this, and if we kill him, we're just like him, stuff like that. And he basically starts beating up on Pax instead, and throws him out of the way. And then at a distance, he gets ready to fire his cannon again, and Pax jumps in the way and basically gets like an entire chunk of his torso and his arm blown off, and he starts sliding off the monument towards like this bottomless pit basically, and D16 runs over and catches him before he falls, and he's doing the whole turning gray thing, and he was asking him like, why would you stop me, why would you get in the way? And I think he uttered something about not being the same as Sentinel or something. I don't remember the exact dialogue, but it was a very good, intense scene. And then I think it was either right at this point or immediately after is when Megatron's eyes finally turn red, and he says, "I'm done saving you," and drops him into the pit. And as this is going on, we see, Pax, basically a lifeless body, falling through like these layers upon layers of Cybertron, and it keeps cutting back and forth between that and D16. Now Megatron basically just ripping Sentinel apart, both figuratively and literally. At the end, literally tearing him in half. And then he starts basically a speech about how there will be no more primes, no more false prophets. We will, choose our destiny by the way of the strongest, or, something along those lines. And then he takes Megatronus's T-Cog out of Sentinel Prime's chest, because he mentioned earlier that he had it, he took it for himself. Because apparently the T-Cogs do have certain properties to them. So he takes it from Sentinel, and small note, all the other ones they got were blue, but this one specifically appears purple. I don't know if there's any major thing behind that, or they just wanted it to be purple to distinguish it being, from Megatronus Prime, maybe because, he's Decepticon now, something like that. But yeah, basically, he puts that in, and in the original scene where they get their T-Cogs, their bodies all shift and change, and in this, not only does he start shifting and changing again, but he becomes much more bulky. He definitely has much more armament. He goes from having like his fusion cannon to having like a triple barrel fusion cannon, and having like another gun on his other arm, like a small gun on his other arm. He definitely seems very much bulked up by this. And as we cut back to, Pax falling, all these like walls and stuff are moving out of the way as he falls, until he basically falls into this like bluish white void, which obviously is supposed to be like the core of Cybertron, where, the life force of Primus resides, that kind of thing. And then you hear Alpha Trion talking about how he's selfless and heroic and whatnot, and that they will bestow upon him the title of Prime, and ensuring the future and giving him the Matrix. And then the Matrix reforms from nothingness and flies into his chest. And then he turns into basically this bright white light and skyrockets back up towards the surface. And as Megatron is finishing his speech, he basically does that scene from the trailer where he slams down as Optimus Prime, and it's super cool. And basically he turns towards Megatron, and I believe at this point Megatron said, "They gave you the Matrix." And, I think there was a little more dialogue to it. I can't remember all the specifics. Again, I just saw this movie for the first time, so my memory's not that great. But, yeah, essentially, he said, like, we could have built the future together, like in the trailer, and then they start fighting. And, it just sort of becomes a brawl between the two of them, which obviously ends with Prime winning his first initial bout. He, through the power of the Matrix charging him up, he, forms his Energon axe out of his hand, and apparently he can do both hands, interchange it, and he can, like, spin around and do cool stuff. But essentially, the fight ends when he cuts his fusion cannon in half, and he's basically beaten down, and Optimus tells him that he's banished from the city of Iacon and to take the High Guard and leave, so he does. And then basically, with the Matrix there, he starts giving his speech, Energon starts flowing out of this monument, and then it cuts away to Cybertron, highlighting blue. And, then, like, out of this monument, a bunch of blue orbs come up and, like, turn into cogs and start going into all the different bots, and they start, changing too. And you see, like, a bunch of familiar characters turning from, like, basic looking bots into their more recognizable forms. There was, like, Ironhide, I remember RC, I believe, Jazz was there. There was a whole bunch of them. I could sit here for like the next hour trying to name off all the ones I saw, and I don't even remember most of it. I definitely want to go watch the movie again sometime soon in the theater if I can, just to get a second tour through, see what things I missed in the initial viewing. But yeah, that's essentially where it wraps up. Is Cybertron is doing better, and then he declares that they are the Autobots, and it shows all of them like driving along the surface, and he does his usual speech into space thing from the Michael Bay movies. And instead of we are here, we are waiting, it's beware Quintessons, if you try and come back, we will fight you. Which is, the last mention of the Quintessons. They really, I was expecting them to have at least a little bit of a bigger role, but yeah, they were really just a plot point at most. I mean, they really did not have that much significance overall. But yeah, who knows? Maybe sequel. Sequel. Then we get our first credit scene, which is B going down to his bunkmates, the garbage piles that remotely look like robots, and talking about, oh yeah, I'm working for the government now and stuff like that. And then he is like, oh wait, look, I got knife hands, and then he stabs like two of the robots and like kills them. But yeah, it was just one of those like goofy, like wrap up the movie kind of things. But then if you wait through all the credits, there is another one, and again, this isn't like super significant, but is an interesting little thing. It's Megatron putting branding the Decepticon symbol over and over again, and then it cuts to all the familiar Decepticons with the symbol on them, in various places. And then he says, like, we will not be deceived anymore because we are Decepticons, or something like that. And, then he raises his cannon to the air, and they all start firing like crazy, cheering. But that was a neat little thing they threw in at the end. Again, not super important to the story, but interesting nonetheless. If you didn't see it, initially, you weren't missing out on any pivotal information. The Megatron becomes the leader of the Decepticons. I mean, how many times has that happened? But But yeah, overall, I really did enjoy the movie. There were, plenty of little Easter eggs to pick up on, and I mentioned ones I remember, and I'm sure there are dozens more that I either forgot or didn't even see the first time through. Like I said, I want to go see the movie again and see what I missed on the first run. But it was a good movie. Again, there were only a couple scenes where I had any issue at all. The main one that comes to mind was during the fight at the outpost for the High Guard on the surface. During one of the fight scenes, it did get a little Michael Bay-ish there with, I can't tell what's going on, everything's moving too fast, and there's like motion blur everywhere. And at that point I was like, this feels Michael Bay-ish, and yeah, it turns out he was still involved with this film, So, I will admit the guy does good action most of the time, but I'm not a big fan of his other directing qualities. But, he did bring Transformers back into the limelight with his original movies. I'm not going to try and deny that. There are plenty of people who have grown to be fans because of those movies. And, at the end of the day, that's a good thing. But yeah, I would definitely recommend the movie. I would definitely say it's a 9 out of 10. It wasn't perfect, but I really felt like it was good. I feel that it paid good tribute to many continuities, G1 included, and it really, flushed out the relationship between Prime and Megatron before they were Prime and Megatron. It was very cool to see that, flushed out over the span of a full movie. And I definitely, there's been a thing that many people have said before. I know I'm not the first, and I will not be the last. It was nice to see a movie without any humans in it. I get that, a lot of times, most of the stories take place on Earth, and humans are on Earth, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be involved at all, but a lot of times they do get over involved, and that was another big thing I had against the Michael Bay movies. It was a little too much, and I actually had that problem with some monster movies, like the original Godzilla, 2014 Godzilla movie. A little too much people in this movie that is not called people, if you know what I mean. But overall, I think that was a good decision to, especially, considering it's an origin story. It's better than having them on Earth talking about the good old days, actually showing us where it started. I think that was a great point to revamp the series from. I really think that, if people go and see this, it can do well. I've heard that, a lot of people are saying it's only okay. Some people are saying it's bad. The initial box office record or turnout or whatever it's called isn't looking super great. I really think that it's more so an effect from people being worn out from the last few movies, especially with how wacky and sort of paint by numbers-ish almost Rise of the Beast was. Like, I saw Bumblebee and Rise of the Beast within the last year. I finally bothered to sit down and watch them. I thought Bumblebee was okay. Rise of the Beasts, I was never a huge fan of Beast Wars, even though that was the first show I really remember watching. But by no means did I hate it. And I think I mentioned on at least one of my review or first impression videos that I mostly get the Beast Wars themed figures more for a nostalgia and just a collector standpoint than an actual love of those specific characters. And I love the figures. I try and get as many different kinds as I can. I mean, heck, I got 3 different sound waves right here. By the way, review coming soon. Sorry, a shameless self plug. I really feel like the way the Michael Bay movies went really became a little bit too straightforward and predictable, and people got tired of that. And I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, it's probably just going to be that again. Give it a little while, and I'm certainly hopeful that people are going to start looking at it like, oh, this is a little different. They're doing something new here. Let's go check it out after all. I'm hoping that's the case. And not just, people are saying it's bad without really, seeing it or, just casual people who don't really care about the series saying like, oh, I'm not gonna bother to see it because the last one kind of sucked or something like that. I am hoping it'll get a second wind, because I think it deserves some recognition. Again, it wasn't absolutely perfect, and it's still a adventurous movie that is fairly aimed at kids. It's definitely has a younger audience in mind, but it's not like so dumbed down or simple. It's not like you're watching Dora the Explorer. You're not watching Dora the Explorer here. I would say it's probably something that you would be able to bring your kids to, but you might enjoy it still anyway, even if you're not a Transformers fan. I think it's a solid movie, and I think it's really made to be a stepping stone for what could come next, and I think that it's doing a good job with that, and that people should at least go give it a chance. And I understand, a lot of people probably are wary about, because how the last few movies went. The Michael Bay movies got really, worn out. Then Bumblebee, kicked some life back into it for a little bit, and then Rise of the Beast was like, all right, we're gonna double back, and people were like, oh God, not this stuff again. But yeah, this is different. It's for the most part, it's still got good action. It's actually got some character development and plot. You actually get to know the main cast. It's not just, kill the Decepticons. Don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for that. And, Revenge of the Fallen was my favorite of the Michael Bay movies because it made Optimus look really awesome, in my opinion. And I know a lot of people don't like that movie for several reasons, but I love that movie because I felt it was where he looked his best, his most badass. So, it's going to be down to your personal taste, but I definitely think that if you give it a chance, you'll like it more than what's come in the last, few years. And, it's definitely something I think would be worth bringing your kids to. There's not a ton of, creepy adult jokes or, weird potty humor or anything like that. Bumblebee doesn't pee on anybody. The worst thing is where he calls himself Badassatron, and honestly, that's more cringe than gross. That's for the most part, most of the jokes land. I knew that was coming, so it didn't bother me too much. He does say it a few times, and then after a little while, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we get the point. But they do sort of turn it into a character quirk where he won't ever shut up. They literally, Starscream's gang, literally bolts his mouth shut because he won't stop talking even while they have him unconscious, and he still pulls it off, and they're like, I told you it wasn't tight enough. So honestly, I think they did a good job of turning that cringy moment into something that was actually genuinely entertaining. So yeah, I think I'll wrap it up there. There's plenty of ifs and buts of what they could have done different or what could have possibly been better, but I think for what it is, the movie did really well. I think it deserves to do really well, both as far as audience and as far as box office and all that, because I definitely would like to see more of what they did here. So if you haven't seen the movie, give it a chance, go see it, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. But that's enough out of me. This is Soul Prime signing out for the day.